and for the people. This is L. Nathan here. Welcome you to our broadcast. Focus on providing you insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And, of course, our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. I want to give another shout-out of love to James Braun, who had been our producer for so many years. He passed away, but we still have him in our heart. That was his voice you heard in the intro of the program. And I just want to make sure we all just keep him in our thoughts and remember how much we appreciate the work that he did for our community.
Amen.
We're here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. He's the Amen chorus. Say amen again.
Amen.
All right. And we're normally here with Norma Carter, who is our in-studio audience of one. I think we told you that he had a bit of an accident, and it's going to take him a little while to get past it. But I expect him next week. What do you think about next week?
By Monday, he said by Monday he should be better. I mean, he's limping. He's walking up the stairs and down the steps, very slowly, but
you notice Buff State is a big campus. We don't want him to walk all the way across this campus on gimpy legs and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we look forward for him coming back. I want to take today's program and focus on. I actually had prepared the program to focus on a few things, like this new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and what he is, in my view, what he and his cohorts are inflicting upon America. But before I get there, I came across an article in the Week magazine that I just feel I have to share with you. On this Israeli-Hamas thing, my attitude is all wrong is wrong. Does that make sense, Willie?
Yeah.
That all wrong is wrong?
All wrong should be wrong. If it's all wrong, yeah.
So if you murder somebody,
right,
then I murder somebody.
Right.
Both of us murdered somebody, right?
Right. Something, right.
Both of us should be going to court and trying to fight for our freedom, right?
I would think, especially if it's innocent people involved, too, yeah. Definitely.
Well, I'm assuming that if it's murder, whoever got murdered was innocent.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They may not be innocent of everything in their life,
right,
but they're innocent of having you didn't do anything to them, so why would you murder them, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
I speak to this around this Hamas-Israel matrix that we have going on and the way it's being positioned in our minds. And the way it's positioned in our minds, it's the Israelis are the victims of these terrible Palestinian Hamas people. They killed, first they said 1,400 people, now they say it's 1,200 people that they killed on October 7th. And everything that Israel has done since that point has all been justified. So one of the reports that I read indicated that in the northern half of the Gaza Strip, 25% of all of the buildings in the northern half of the Gaza Strip have been damaged by Israeli bombs. 25%. Think about the block you live on. Count how many houses there are on your block. Let's say there's 15, 16 houses on your block.
Right.
And that 12 of the 16 houses had been either blown up or damaged from explosions that impacted your house. How that would feel for you,
right,
if you lived in that reality.
Absolutely. Any little thing that happens on your block, a fight happens on your block, it kind of emotionally affects you, but any physical damage really.
Right. And I like the block analogy that you give. I grew up in an era, you weren't in this era, but I grew up in an era where there were a lot of big gangs in Buffalo. When I say big gangs, I mean gangs had like 1,000, 2,000 people in the gang. Mm-hmm. They have posses now. They don't have those great big gangs, anymore.
Right.
But imagine if a conflict emerged between, say, the Superiors and the Flying Dutchman, and they're rumbling, and one side, let's say, I'm making up names now, one side, say the Flying Dutchman, let's suppose that they take out something against. They're trying to get people of the superiors organization, and they go on a block and they damage 75% of the houses on that block. Half the houses are completely blown to smithereens, and a quarter of the houses are significantly damaged from, the terror that we rained on that block. Especially when not a single person on that block was a member of the Flying Dutchman.
Right.
Not
Absolutely.
one.
Right.
Now, just because you know some people
Right.
that may know some people
Right.
on that block doesn't justify you killing
Absolutely.
those people.
Because I think back when I was probably 10, 12, probably 12 years, 11, maybe 10, 11, we used to have a gang leader babysit us. Mm-hmm. Now, we had no affiliations. Mm-hmm. My mother and father, I think they were maybe that was their nephew or something. Mm-hmm. So he would come. He was about 18 years old. Great guy, cook good food. All we knew was this guy made great dinner. That's all we knew.
And he made things fun.
He made things fun and a great dinner. So, but he was, later on I found out he was the head of a gang leader. Just imagine somebody was after him and they would kill us. We had nothing to do with it.
Exactly. That's my point. They would say, well, he babysit those kids,
right.
So those kids, they deserve to be killed.
Right. We had no clue he was even in a gang.
I want to read something to you. This is an article. It's on page 15 of the, which week was this? I'm not good at reading these. Yeah, I can't pick out where the what the issue number is here. But here, I'm looking at the wrong thing. This is the November 24th, 2023 edition of the Week magazine, and if you go on page 15 of this magazine, I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs to you, and then I just want to get your feedback. While the world is focused on the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, settler attacks on Palestinians are surging in the West Bank. Now, the attack on Israel was an attack that came from the Gaza Strip that attacked Israel, right? So you would think that you would be reacting to the people in the Gaza Strip. The West Bank is not the same as the Gaza Strip.
I got you.
Okay. So according to Marlon Schubert of Der Western, which is a German magazine, says that the settlers, religious zealots, are religious zealots who have built fortress-like Jewish enclaves in the Palestinian territory with the blessing of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, I need for us to understand, they make this sound like these settlers and religious zealots built these fortress-like Jewish enclaves in reaction to the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel. But you can't build in a month, fortress-like enclaves, right? They had to have been building these fortress-like enclaves sometime in the past several months, if not the past several years.
Right.
And these are enclaves that are being built on Palestinian territory. Right. This is not Israel's territory, it's Palestinians' territory.
Right.
And these Palestinians, who they're referring to as settlers and as zealots, they're building fortresses occupying territory in the Palestinian territory. Mm-hmm. I wonder why the Palestinians are upset.
I got you. Okay.
Just trying to help us now, right? Then it goes on to say that since the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas, such violence has been raging, quote, out of control. And it says armed settlers. Notice the words that are used. Out of control, armed settlers, not terrorists, armed settlers have attacked Palestinian villages almost every day. This is a quote from the article. Now, it's not me saying this. The article says that these armed settlers have attacked Palestinian villages almost every day. The settlers have taken over more than a dozen Palestinian villages, forcing out hundreds of families and have killed at least 8 people. The Israeli army, far from stopping them, seems to be supporting them. Israeli troops hunting for Hamas militants in the West Bank, not in the Gaza Strip, hunting for Hamas militants, have killed at least 187 Palestinians in the West Bank. And then when the German reporters tried to report on the violence, the Israeli soldiers pointed their guns at the German news reporters.
Wow.
Now, I could go further in this, but I'm just trying to help us understand what is going on here. You have a whole series of horrible things that have been done by Palestinians to Israelites in reaction to the Israelites occupying Palestinian land. But you also have horrible things being done by the Israeli occupiers of the Palestinian land.
Both parties, yeah.
And they've been doing this consistently.
Not only that, Mr. Hare, what the tragedy I see is that the media, they flipping or changing things up. They go Hamas, and then they'll go Palestinians. So when they report the news, it's like Hamas is Palestinians.
Right.
So, and that makes
they make it seem like they're equivalent words. They're the same thing.
Absolutely.
See, and
that's wrong.
And that's just not true.
Right.
There's 2.4 or had been 2.4 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. According to Israel, who I would think is overstating the number, there's something like 30,000 members of the Hamas organization. But 30,000 members of the Hamas organization doesn't even make up 0.5% of the population of Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. But you are punishing all of the people.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. You took away all of the water. You took away all of the food. You took away all of the light. Right. You took away all of the heat. You took away. Then you bombed hospitals. You bombed schools. You bombed residential neighborhoods, apartment buildings, and so on, because you're trying to get Hamas. No, you're trying to get Palestinians.
Right.
Your goal is to drive Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip altogether. Right. And to take it over and make it another part.
And then it's automatic. If you bombing me, you doing me damage.
Right.
I'm going to start to have a certain hatred for you. I'm Palestinian. You bombing me. You killing me. I didn't do nothing to you.
Right.
Hamas did, but I didn't do nothing.
Right.
Now, there's a certain hatred that starts to build up in me, too.
And, I mean, I give the example of the Armenians all the time we talk about this, Willie. You know, I told you about this back in the 1915s, 1920s, whatever it was, that this is the end of the Ottoman Empire, but Turkey, the center of the Ottoman Empire. And they wanted the land that the Armenians lived in.
Right.
And so they drove the Armenians out. And they killed something in the area. I'm not sure if it's 100,000 or 1 million. I think it's closer to 1 million Armenians that were killed by the Ottoman Empire centered in Turkey. And Turkey refuses to allow the term Holocaust to be used in relation to what the Turks did, the Ottomans did, to the Armenians. And they won't allow the history books to even talk about this in the context of what Turkey did. But the reason why I bring them up is because the Armenians who survived the Holocaust that the Ottomans and Turkey did to them, that the reason why those people still harbor hate in their heart for Turkey to this very moment, they cannot let go of their hatred, their anger.
Their families.
Now, this happened literally 102 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The Armenians still have the same rage, the same hatred, the same judgment in their heart this moment that they had back in 1920 when this thing, went down.
Right.
If they feel that way, if the Jewish people, when 6 million people were murdered by the Nazis in Germany, And they continue to harbor their fear and their anger and their hatred at these Nazi-type people.
Right.
Why would you think that these Palestinians who lived in Palestine in relative peace and security before Rommel and these Nazis rolled in there from Germany and trying to extend their control over Palestine, they hadn't done anything. They weren't even involved in World War II. They had nothing to do with it.
Wow.
Right? And whatever the European people did to the Jews, the Palestinian people didn't do it. They had nothing to do with it. In fact, Jewish people and Palestinian Arabs lived side by side, sometimes upstairs and downstairs in the same houses for decades. With no little
malice.
conflicts. There's always little conflicts. You know, you got Protestants saying ugly stuff about Catholics. You know how y'all do. You know, you making ugly jokes about Polish people.
Baptists,
y'all roll like that. But but nothing that is of any significance, okay? They live with each other for thousands of years. And now you've got these people having half of their land taken from them, and Israel kicked 750,000 of the Palestinians out of their own land, out of their houses, out of their businesses, out of their cemeteries, out of their orchards. Kick these people out and say, I don't care where you're going, but you got to go someplace else.
I
You
would
can't
feel
stay
some
here.
type of way, too.
You would feel some kind of way. I mean, let's just be real about that, right? Now, when I say you're going to feel some kind of way, I'm not saying this to justify the Hamas people killing babies, chopping people's heads off, raping women, all that. They need to be fried in whatever the metaphor of a frying pan is. They need to be fried in a frying pan. They need to be caught, and they need to be judged before criminal courts. And all the things that the law of that land says should be done to you, that's what should happen to you, period, okay? No ifs, ands, or buts about that. But does that justify hundreds and hundreds of Israelis going into Palestinian territories and attacking villages, driving people out of their homes, taking away their livelihoods, occupying their houses, building their own houses on top of their houses? Does that justify mass terror campaigns by these so-called settlers and zealots? They're not settlers and zealots. They're terrorists. See, now, when the terrorism is being done against Palestinians, you act like it's not terrorism. You know, it's some sort of, Israeli nationalism. It has some other kind of context to it. But when terrorism is done by Palestinians when deliberately horrible things, horrific things are done by Palestinians to Israelis, that's terrorism.
Gotcha.
We got to get this straight. We got to start saying things the correct way, so that people can develop the right posture, so that people like me, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not Israeli. I'm not Palestinian. My only dog in the fight is I want to see right done and I want to see wrong not done.
Absolutely.
And if right is going on, I want to do things to help more right happen.
And you could see it in the protesters. Palestinians, probably it's some Israelites, all types of people in that fight. And they just want it to be right. That's all.
And, I mean, there are many Palestinians who are willing to accept the paradigm that I've given many times in this hour, that regardless of what you say about Israel's right to have that land, because the Palestinians didn't sell this land to the Israelites, the Balfour Resolution weaved together the Americans, the French, and the English, and the Italians, and so on, and they just took half of Palestine's land and gave it to Israel and said you could set up the nation of Israel. That occurred, but that occurred 75 years ago. That happened in 1947. It's 2023. That's almost 76 years ago. That happened. It may be wrong. From my view, it's wrong, but it happened. It's already happened. There are grandkids, maybe even great-grandkids of people that lived in the new state of Israel that have been born. There may be 4 generations that have been born in Israel over the course of this time. You can't wipe that out. That can't cease to exist. So the Palestinians are just stuck with the reality that Israel now exists. And so now you have to operate from the frame of reference, what do we do now that Israel has been put into existence?
Right.
You all have put up billions and billions and billions of dollars every year and erected Israel. You need to put up billions and billions of dollars for many years to erect a new Palestinian state. And if you can't trust the people that are trying to represent the Palestinians, then you create an entity. How many people can it possibly take to police an area that only has 4 million people in it or 6 million people in it? Mm-hmm. I mean, it can't. We have. You could take the government of Erie County and multiply it by 3 and be able to run, the Palestinian territory. You know what I mean? It can't be that hard to do. If you can't find people in Palestine to do the work, get some other people to do it, and then train Palestinians to do the work. And when they're able to take over, let them take over function by function, job by job.
Right.
And then you go on and do some other work for some other people someplace else. Mm-hmm. That's what should be done. This is not an irresolvable problem, but you have to accept certain realities. Israelites have to accept the fact that Israel is a biblical, mythical entity to most of the people in the world. Remember, there was no such thing as the word Israel until the one God renamed Jacob Israel. Before then, there was nobody called Israel any place on earth. Mm-hmm. So Israel is essentially the name of a clan, a family, the descendants of Jacob. Jacob had, 12 sons or 13 sons, whichever way you count it. If you count the 2 kids of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, but however you count that, they were the tribes that descended from Jacob. Does anybody disagree with that? Right? And so those 12 tribes were Israel. Well, what happened here? Jacob's kids moved into Egypt because there was a famine in the land that Jacob lived in. They moved to Egypt. Joseph, who preceded them into Egypt, he was now an chief administrator in Egypt, and he allowed them to be able to move into an area called Goshen in the northeast part of Egypt. They lived there for 415 years. There was no state of Israel during the course of that time. There was no state of Israel before then, and there was no state of Israel during those 415 years.
Got it.
Now they move into the Promised Land. They kill everybody they could find, and they didn't kill as many as they were supposed to kill according to their text. But they did what they could, and they took over territory in what was then called Canaan, which we would now call the Palestinian corridor.
Was that the land of milk and honey?
The land of milk and honey, okay? So they rolled in, and they took up space. But they went for another 400 years. Nobody was called, there was no nation of Israel. They had no kingdom.
What about Palestine? Was Palestine?
Well, Palestine is just the name of a territory, right? And I think it's named after the Philistines. Mm-hmm. But there were people that lived in Palestine. There were Hittites, and there were Ammonites, and there were Amorites, and there were Edomites, and there were Jebusites. There was all kind of ites, that lived in.
Well, in the Bible, didn't God wanted them to get rid of all the ites?
They were told to wipe them all out.
And I think that's the mindset today.
And not just them. They were supposed to wipe out the goats and the sheep and the chickens and the pigs and
everything.
Wipe everything.
They would keep the booty. They would keep all the goats.
But that's not what they were asked to do. That's not what the text said. The text says wipe them all out.
Yeah, but they wouldn't.
And they didn't. So disobedience, but that's another part of the story. Right. The main part from the territorial perspective is that there were the people who are the ancestors of the current Palestinians are the same people who were living in Palestine when Israel exited from Egypt into Canaan. The people that they bounced against and bumped into and fought against, they're the ancestral Aboriginal people in the Palestinian corridor. Israel were invaders to the Palestinian corridor. Where did the Israelites' father patriarch Jacob and his father Abraham, or Isaac, where did they come from? The text says that Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees. Ur, Chaldea, is in the southeastern portion of the Mesopotamian region, which would have been essentially where Syria is now, greater Syria is now, okay? So if that's where you're from, how come that's not your aboriginal homeland? If that's where your people come, the Bible says that Laban, who was the brother of Abraham, was a Syrian. I didn't make that up. That's what the Bible says. The Bible says Terah or Tetra, whatever his name was the father of Abraham. The Bible says that he was a Syrian. So if Abraham's father was a Syrian and Abraham's brother was a Syrian, what was Abraham? Well, I'll just tell you, he had to be a Syrian too. If your father is an Edomite and your brother is an Edomite, you got to be an Edomite, right?
Yeah.
So if Abraham was a Syrian, if Abraham's father was a Syrian and Abraham's brother was a Syrian, then Abraham can't be something different than they were. He's the same cloth, right? So Abraham wasn't a Syrian. So if we're talking about Aboriginal people, the Aboriginal people that the Israelites come from is from Abraham. Abraham did not come from Palestine. He came from Ur of the Chaldees in what would have been eastern Syria at that time. All that I'm saying to help us to understand that, we are building foreign policy on the basis of a particular religion's testimony in a particular book believed in by that particular religion. Set aside whether or not you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, and ask yourself, if we allow the government of the United States to adopt a state religion like Rome adopted Christianity as a state religion, and then we say that everybody else has to roll with the religion of the state, is that really what you want for your country? Mm-hmm. Or do you want a country where you could be Muslim, you could be Buddhist, you could be Masa'u, you could be whatever, religious tradition, that you come from, without any fear that you're going to be terrorized by other people who think about life differently than you do.
Right.
Okay? That's really what this is all about. The assertion that Palestine, half of Palestine, is what was originally Israelite territory. That may have been. I don't know all the contours. I don't have it all in my head, but that may have been that there was a point where the one God gave the promised land to the children of Israel. Okay, that's in your book. Mm-hmm. But the person who lives in India, 800 miles away, is that in their book?
Gotcha. I got you. I understand what you're saying.
Are they required to believe what's in your book and set aside what they believe in their book?
Right.
What about the 1.5 million people that live in China? Is that in their book?
What's in their book, yeah.
Right?
Gotcha.
I mean, we got lots of people who got books.
Right.
And their books all have their own, belief systems in them.
Different tradition, cultures, different leaders, different.
So we can't be basing our decisions on the basis of what's in everybody's book, right? Because then we got to start having book fights. Right. If you don't believe in my book, I'm going to fight you. If you don't believe, and I don't believe in your book, you're going to fight me.
I think most Americans, though, read the same book that the Israelites read. That's why we tend to be favored with them.
Right, and that's true. But and I don't know if I wrote this down, but the First Amendment says that you cannot create a state religion. Right. And so we're supposed to avoid getting caught up in that trap. Right. Of saying, 75% of the people in this country say they're Christians. Mm-hmm. I would wager that only 25% of that 75% actually practice Christianity.
It could be less than that.
You know what I mean? I mean, many of them
be less than that, sir.
Right. Many of them talk about they're Christians, but, do they actually practice Christianity? Now,
right.
I go to church every Sunday, right? I don't go to Bible school on Thursdays, but I go to church every Sunday. I read my text many times over and over and over again. I am a believing Christian, but I'm not imposing my belief on you. You get a right to believe whatever it is that you choose to believe. Right. I just think that there are things that we have to agree on together that are not specific to your religion. You don't have the right to kill me. You don't have the right to steal from me. You don't have the right to take my wife. You don't have the right.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? You don't have the right to do many things. They're called the 10 Commandments, right? You just don't have the right to break these things. Right. Period. Okay, that's what my schema is.
Right.
That there are things that we should be able to agree on, independent of whatever faith system you come from. So that's enough on that. I just wanted to get that out. I know we're into my second hour, so let's take a quick break and talk to our sponsors. Then we'll get back to you. Please don't go away. We will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo. Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host here for this next half an hour, here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome back, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here. Calling y'all, 716-878-5104.
Yeah, let us hear your thoughts. We'd like to hear what you think about what we're talking about. I wanted to move for a bit to talk a little bit about this speaker, Mike Johnson. See, one of the things that we have to understand in an election is that you're not electing a single person. You're electing that person plus all of the people that person would appoint into the offices that operate the various departments of the government level that person is in control of. So if you elect a mayor, you're electing not only that mayor, you're electing that mayor's commissioners of transportation, of parks and recreation, whatever it is, housing, and so on. You're electing all of those people. At the county level, you'd be electing a county executive, but you're also electing whoever's going to be the chairperson or the secretary or commissioner of, energy conservation, and so on. When you're talking about a president, you got 12 departments of government. Each one of those governments are run by a secretary. You are electing the president, but you're also electing who the people that person would appoint to become the heads of those executive offices of the federal government. And then those people appoint people under them, so you're electing all of them at the same time. This is an important context for us to understand, because when people elected Donald Trump, they may have felt, well, I know he's kind of crazy, he's the apprentice, he's, goofy, and, he's got wild hair, and, this is third marriage or whatever it was, with this guy. He doesn't seem to have much integrity, but we like him because he talks like us. He makes us feel good, about how we talk amongst ourselves.
He's a real dude, man.
Right.
He says what he's thinking.
But then he winds up hiring a guy to run the post office who tries to destroy the post office, right? He hires guys who are taking the resources of their office and using it to ingratiate or to enlarge themselves.
Yeah.
And so on, right? So basically, you hire bad people. This is a bad person, and he hired bad people. Mm-hmm. Well, we hire Republicans to be, or not Republicans, we hire people to be our Congress people, as well as people to be our senators, independent of whoever the president is. When you hire these people to be your Congress people, if you hire people that have bad spirits, they're going to do bad things as Congress people. What am I talking about? We had this guy, Kevin McCarthy, who had become the Speaker of the House of Representatives. But in order to get that job, he had to sell his soul, to the most right-wing people in the Republican Party. Then, in order to keep the government open, he had to do a deal that required him getting Democratic votes. And the Democrats said, we'll do the deal only on the condition that you leave every government level or every government department's funding level at the same level that it is right now. You don't have to increase it, but you can't decrease it until we get to a final budget for the year that ends September 30th of this year, or of next year, rather. So that was the deal that McCarthy struck. They threw him out of his job, right? Matt Gaetz said, no, we can't put up with that. I don't like you anyway. And they voted, to do a no confidence vote, essentially, on McCarthy. He didn't get the no confidence vote, so he got kicked out. So then they hire another guy, Mike Johnson. This Mike Johnson guy, I need for you all to understand what you hired. So it's not just when you hire these Republicans, people like him, you need to know what it is that you're hiring, because sometimes in the old days, we used to hire people that were public servants, whether you were a Republican or a Democrat, a progressive, or whatever you called yourself. You were primarily a public servant, and that was your career path. You wanted to serve the public. You may have had certain policy preferences that were different than from somebody else's policy preferences, but your goal was to serve the people and to make government work for the people. That's what it used to be about. Now we have people that have, how should I say it, almost religious-based ideologies, and their view is, I want government to run like my ideology, my religious ideology, and I'm willing to destroy government if that's what I have to do in order for me to be able to have my religion, my ideology be the one that we operate from. So let me make that make sense. I mentioned an article written by Margaret Hartman. It was called 22 Non-Fun Facts About Speaker Mike Johnson. It was in the Intelligencer online magazine. This article actually was written on November 20th, so it's just a few days ago. And she talks about this Mike Johnson as being a congressperson from Louisiana that almost no one knew anything about. Now, it's odd that you could say that a person could be a congressperson and no one knew anything about him, because they had to have at least 750,000 people in the congressional district that he ran in. Mm-hmm. They had to know about him, right? So there must have been, a much larger body of people that knew about him, but that's what they were saying in this article. But she goes on to say some things about him that I think that we need to be clear about. Mm-hmm. He, according to her, masterminded Trump's election coup. Now, what she's talking about is when Trump was trying to figure out, how do I keep my job as president of the United States even though I lost the election, he's reaching out to all of his homeboys. What can I do? What moves can I make? What tricks can I play? What can I manipulate? Mike Johnson shows up and says, well, I got a piece of game for you. We could say that because of the pandemic, they changed voter rules, election law in many states around the country, especially in states where Joe Biden won and won the majority of the votes over Donald Trump. And when they changed those election laws, they were done improperly. They didn't say illegally. They said they were done, they made the changes improperly. And since they were done improperly, then the results of those elections should be set aside. And the election results, and I'm reading now to you. Here's what, this is Jonathan Chait writing in the New York Magazine. And he goes on to talk about how this Johnson crafted an argument that several states had improperly changed their voting rules in response to the pandemic, thus nullifying their results and allowing the Republican House to select the winner. Now, even the words don't make sense. If you're saying that they changed election law improperly, they didn't change the election law for Republicans. They didn't change the election law for Democrats. They changed the election law that made it possible for you to do mail-in voting. That's what Mike Johnson was focused on, was these votes that came in by mail. And his assertion is that the changes in election law that made it possible to do this mail-in voting campaign, that those changes were made improperly. They weren't voted on according to whatever the protocol was for your state legislature to vote for those changes. So on the basis of that, he's saying that those votes should be set aside. But he's not actually saying that. That's what I'm saying, that these votes should be set aside. What he's saying is not only should the votes be set aside, the vote should be given to Donald Trump. How do we go from election law got changed, too many mail-in ballots were submitted in accordance with the new wrinkles in the voting regulations, and we disagree with that. That was improper. How does that turn into you give the votes to Donald Trump? But that's the craziness. That's Mike Johnson. That's what he is supporting. His arguments had a singular influence. According to the article, 3 out of every 4 Republicans supporting Trump's election, his election challenge rather, relied on the arguments of Representative Mike Johnson, who was the most important architect of the Electoral College objections that were being made on January 6th.
So what you're trying to say, he is very crafty.
Very crafty. And he's the shifty one who came up with this schema, which you can see doesn't even make sense the way I've explained it, but that's what he was pushing.
And that's why he got the position now.
That's why he got the job.
He said this man can manipulate and help us to win.
He's our guy.
He's our guy.
He believes in not only lying, he believes in coming up with intellectual arguments,
right.
That make it, it's not really a lie,
Right.
So, and then this guy he's a novice as far as his political resume is concerned. He was elected to the U.S. House in 2016, so he's only been a legislator for 7 years. He's in his fourth term, never served in a senior leadership position or even as the chair of a committee. So that makes him, according to the article, the least experienced person elected to the top position since John Carlisle in 1883. So it's been 140 years since somebody as inexperienced as him has been the Speaker of the House.
Wow.
It goes on to say that he worked for the conservative legal group behind the case that ended Roe versus Wade. This is the organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom. He worked for them for 8 years. Now,
he was part of that also.
Right. So if you're pro-abortion, you're with this guy. If you're not for pro-abortion, you're not with this guy. I'm with you have the right to make a decision about what you're going to do with your body, just like I have a right to make a decision about what I'm going to do with my body. You don't get to tell me what I can and cannot do with my own body unless what I'm talking about doing is illegal.
Mr. Hare, you say he was pro-abortion. He's not pro-abortion, is he?
No, I'm sorry. He's anti-abortion. He's pro-life was the word I wanted to say, right? Yeah. And so, according to this article, this Alliance Defending Freedom organization They were responsible for the campaign that resulted in overturning Roe versus Wade. They also won successfully a campaign allowing employer-sponsored health insurance to exclude birth control. So if you have an employer-funded health insurance plan, that employer can say, well, I'll do the health insurance for everything except birth control. If it's birth control, you got to pay for it yourself. That can't be paid for out of the plan. He also sponsored rolling back limits on government support for religious organizations. In other words, bringing church and state closer together. He also advocated for protecting the anonymity of donors to advocacy groups. So the very thing we've been talking about for years, that you have these huge donors putting money up into political action committees. Nobody gets to know who those donors are. So you have people manipulating you, and you don't even know who the people are, let alone what their objective is in their trying to manipulate you. You have he also supported blocking pandemic-related public health rules. This is the guy who tried to say that the vaccines were the problem. It's the vaccines that are going to kill you, not the coronavirus or COVID-19. That's not going to kill you. It's the vaccines that are going to kill you. That sort of stuff, right? Now, we lost over 1 million people because of these lies about, not getting vaccinated.
Right.
Right?
Right.
He's a part of that. He's also a part of that crew that fought for this baker to not have to do a wedding cake for a same-sex marriage couple. And, Will, just so we remember the context of this, there actually was no same-sex couple that the baker was refusing to do a wedding cake for. This was a hypothetical case that somebody said, well, what if a man and a man want to get married and want to have a wedding cake, and they go to this baker over here and ask him to make the wedding cake? What if that happened? They actually took that up as a case for the Supreme Court. Why would some silly, piddling, nonsensical, hypothetical as that get all the way to the Supreme Court?
No.
There was no party to be injured because there was no party complaining.
Matter of fact, I had DJ for a wedding. It was 2 girls getting married, and at the last few days, they supposed to have got their order, and the merchant said, "No, I can't make cars for you guys."
Right, because you're same sex. You're same sex. Can't do it.
So at the last moment,
So this is Mike Johnson, though. That's his game, right? He also sponsored at least 3 bills hoping to ban abortion. One was called the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Another was called the Protecting Pain Capable Unborn Children from Late-Term Abortions Act. And another one was the Heartbeat Protection Act of 2021. And the thing is, all of these bills that he's pushed, none of these things actually got voted on. But they all carried criminal penalties of up to 5 years in prison for physicians who perform abortions. So if you are with somebody like Mike Johnson, you need to know that Mike Johnson, if he had his way, he would have the doctors who were involved in procedures for an abortion or something that somebody considered to be an abortion, for them to go to prison for 5 years for providing medical care for that woman in those circumstances. He also came up with this bizarre argument during an interview with the New Yorker, Irene Carmen, which said, quote, "Many women use abortion as a form of birth control in certain segments of society." Write that down. Many women use abortion as a form of birth control in certain segments of society. He says, when you break up the nuclear family, when you tell a generation of people that life has no value, no meaning, and it's expendable, then you do wind up with school shooters. So he's saying that the reason why you have people shooting up other people in schools is because of abortion. Now, if you think that makes sense, then you want to hire somebody like Mike Johnson to be your congressperson. But if you think that that's absolutely ludicrous nonsense, You can't hire people like that to be your congressperson. You need to do everything you can to keep people like that out of office. Mm-hmm. He also blamed abortion for Social Security and Medicare cuts. Abortion is the reason for the Medicare cuts. He says he proposed trillions of dollars in cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He said these cuts wouldn't be necessary if forced births were not the law of the land. So he believes not only in, he's anti-abortion, he believes in forced births, that if you get pregnant, you have to bring the child to term. Mm-hmm. Roe versus Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America, according to Johnson. He said if we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, in other words, those kids had not been aborted and they grew up to become adults, they would have become able-bodied workers in the economy. He said we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this. In other words, we wouldn't be underfunded, in Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare. Mm-hmm. He said more people would be paying into Social Security and the Medicare trust funds, and therefore those funds would be more solvent. Right. So that's the deal. If it wasn't for abortion, we wouldn't have a debt crisis. Mm. Then he went on to blame mass shootings on the teaching of evolution, claiming that the United States was founded as a Christian nation. That's what he's saying, but that the United States had gotten off track in recent years with the introduction of things like no-fault divorce laws, legalized abortion, and the teaching of evolution. He says he says this is why he thinks we've had mass shootings in this country is because of teaching evolution. He says, and I'm quoting him, how can a young person go to their schoolhouse and open fire on their classmates? He says, because we've taught a whole generation that there's no right or wrong, that it's about survival of the fittest, and you evolved from primordial slime. Why is it that why is life of any sacred value? He says, because there's no sacred to whom it's owed, none of this should be a surprise. So that's the reason why teaching evolution is the reason why we have mass shootings. Mm-hmm. He even sponsored and successfully won $18 million from the state of Kentucky to fund a Noah's Ark theme park, which represented the creationist theme. It features dinosaurs riding on a life-size Noah's Ark and kids riding on the dinosaurs. Because he thinks that dinosaurs and people live at the same time. This is what you hire, right? There's so much more. He goes on a lot of the same-sex stuff that I don't feel like going through all of that stuff. I don't want you all getting too upset, about me, or about what we're talking about here. But he blamed the post-Katrina looting on America turning away from God. After Hurricane Katrina, he says that Johnson wrote an op-ed blaming the looting that happened after Hurricane Katrina on atheists, on legalized gambling, and then Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco as being a nurturer rather than a firm, decisive leader. That's why people were looting after Hurricane Katrina. They weren't looting because their homes got blown away, because their cars got turned over, because trees had flown through the roofs of their houses, because their businesses were closed, because they didn't have clean water, because they didn't have food. That's not why they were looting. They were looting because they were atheists and they had legalized gambling, and the governor was a nurturing person rather than a strong authoritarian person. Mm. That's what they want you to believe. So he doesn't believe in the separation of church and state. I just want to read what the first clause of the Bill of Rights says. So I know we seem to have difficulty with complex language. Let's try simple language. The first clause in the Bill of Rights states that, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, period. There's no qualifier. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, period. So everything that Mike Johnson says he believes is unconstitutional. Every single thing that I've quoted here that he bases on his religion is unconstitutional. You can't base your decisions based on your religion. You have to base your decisions based on the Constitution. If there's something that needs to be amended in the Constitution, you bring people together and you do an amendment, you get it approved, and you change the Constitution with that amendment. But you can't base any of your decision-making on the basis that this is what my religion believes. That can't be the basis. It has to be a secular basis on which you're making that decision. Otherwise, you're making a particular religion the religion of the state. And if you do that, anybody who's not in that religion is outside of, that covenant, and that creates conflict that's going to turn into, violent struggles in our society. The reason why we haven't had those violent struggles in our society is because we have not had a union of church and state. Because we've kept that separate, people can have their arguments about their religion in their churches, but keep those arguments out of City Hall, out of County Hall, out of the state legislative hall, or the federal legislature. Just trying to help us. There's so many things in here. He said Rome fell. The Roman society fell because of homosexuality. What's his basis for that? Because there's all these people that have been carved into statues that are butt naked. And their jewels are hanging out, in front of them. So any people that do that must be homosexual people. Well, that's not me making that up. I'm reading you from this guy. You see
anybody
it.
with their genitals out is homosexual.
You got Michelangelo over there, along the expressway.
Somebody's giving you a thumbs up. I guess he's a homosexual too. So every time I'm walking around naked, I got homosexual.
You must be gay. That's the reason why. And then you carved it into stone.
Oh yeah.
Over there, you got a statue of him over there on Route 198. So that means whoever put that up there, they must be gay.
So normal people wouldn't do that, which means creative. Of
course not.
All artists are gay. All creative people must be homosexual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The mere fact that you would even create an image of a naked person, must mean that you are homosexual, right?
Boy.
I mean, it's this sort of nonsense. And again, if this was just this guy's belief, but he wasn't a congressperson, I would feel he was a nutty guy. But okay, you just wanted a person with nutty views. But this guy is a congressperson. He's able to vote on laws that bind all of us. And I don't know that you would feel, well, you ask yourself if you feel comfortable with somebody like this being the one who controls legislation in your country. He says that America is depraved and dark, citing queer youth and lack of going to church. He described America as almost irredeemably prepared, his words. And why? Because more kids are openly queer and Americans aren't attending church as much as before, according to an article in Rolling Stone. He told the MAGA pastor Jim Garlow, he said that the culture is so dark and depraved that it is almost irredeemable. As supposed evidence, he says, is the decline of national church attendance, y'all not going to church, and the rise of LGBTQ youth. He lamented that 1 in 4 high school students identifies as something other than straight. Now, I've heard that a stat quoted in the last week and a half or so, that they claim that that's the case. But these are kids. You ask kids at 14, 13, 15, 17 years old, what are you? Are you really straight? I don't even know how they ask the question. But, how do you identify yourself gender-wise? After they've been taught that there's such a thing as, what do they call it, cisgender people, there's non-binary people. They got, I can't even go through all of that. I have difficulty trying to keep up with all of these definitions. But the kids hear all of this all the time. And so when you ask them these questions, they're just giving you answers out of the flow of all the currents of things you got going off in their heads.
Right.
Well, I remember when I was about to play basketball with those guys over there, I was feeling a little bit funny because I thought they were going to be able to beat me up. So I didn't go play. So I must be gay. What does your being gay and your willingness to play basketball have to do with each other, right? It's that sort of stuff, right? Wow. That is being infected into the population, right? You got a call?
No, we got to get out of here.
Oh, is it that?
Yeah.
Man, I didn't get a chance to talk about some of the other things I need to talk about. All right, we got to live with what we got. But it's important for us to understand that we have to fight to safeguard our democracy. There is an appeals court decision. The court deals a blow to Voting Rights Act and how it might impact us. And essentially, what it says is that only the federal government, not private citizens or organizations, can bring lawsuits against allegedly racially discriminatory voting rules. That's a decision that is likely to impact Midwestern states right now because they're covered by the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the circuit court in which this case was decided. But the important thing is, if you have to have the federal government be the one to launch a lawsuit about racial discrimination in voting, you would never get a lawsuit mounted. I mean, the federal government can't respond to 331 million people. Every one of them can file a lawsuit, but they have to file it through the Attorney General of the United States. He just couldn't handle that burden, so it would actually not get done. So hopefully this will get rescinded when it goes to the appellate court above the 8th Circuit Court, and if not there, when it goes to the Supreme Court. But thank you all for listening to us and supporting us. I know we talked about a lot today. I'm just trying to give you more of the flavor of what's going on in our world today and help us to think about it in a more proactive and objective way. Right. But we look forward to talking to you all on, is it Friday, right?
Friday, today's Wednesday.
Right, yep. On Friday here at Living for the People, at 91.3 FM, WBNY. We'll see you all then.